My name is Jason, 58 years old, and I just survived a massive heart attack that left me hospitalized for 3 weeks. Tonight, as I lay in my hospital bed preparing for tomorrow's discharge, my phone rang. It was my daughter Amanda with shocking news. "Dad, I'm getting married tomorrow, and by the way, we've already sold your car and house." I felt my heart monitor beeping faster as anger and confusion washed over me. Then I remembered something crucial that made me laugh despite everything. While I'm about to tell you how my own daughter tried to steal everything I owned, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you've ever been betrayed by someone you loved. Construction has been my life for over 30 years. I started as a laborer right out of high school, carrying lumber and cleaning job sites in the scorching heat and freezing rain. Through determination and countless overtime hours, I worked my way up to foreman, then project supervisor, and finally, construction manager for one of Seattle's largest development companies. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid the bills and allowed me to provide a good life for my family. My wife Linda and I built our life together in that modest 4-bedroom house in the suburbs. We bought it when it was just a basic starter home, and over the years, I personally renovated every square inch of it. New hardwood floors installed on weekends, kitchen cabinets I built in the garage during winter months, a deck where we hosted countless summer barbecues. That house represented decades of sweat equity and financial sacrifice. Linda was diagnosed with aggressive breast cancer 8 years ago. The disease moved quickly, taking her from us in less than 6 months. Those final days in hospice care were the hardest of my life. Amanda was 26 when her mother died, old enough to understand, but still young enough to be devastated by the loss. We grieved together initially, finding comfort in our shared memories of Linda. But something changed in the months after the funeral. Amanda became increasingly distant, eventually moving to Portland for a job opportunity. Our weekly phone calls became monthly, then sporadic at best. When she did call, conversations were strained. She began making comments about how I had always put work before family, and how I was never there during her childhood. These accusations stung because they contained just enough truth to make me question myself. Had I worked too many weekends? Missed too many school events? The construction business demands long hours, and I had been the primary breadwinner. I retired 2 years ago at 56. It was earlier than I had planned. But after 30-plus years of physical labor, followed by the stress of management, my body was telling me it was time. Thanks to decades of careful saving and Linda's life insurance, I was financially secure. The house was paid off completely, which gave me tremendous peace of mind. I had planned to travel some, maybe volunteer, and hopefully rebuild my relationship with Amanda. Then came the heart attack 3 weeks ago. I was at the grocery store when a crushing pain spread across my chest. A retired nurse happened to be in the same aisle and recognized what was happening immediately. She called 911 while another shopper started CPR. The doctors told me later that I would have died without their quick intervention. The main artery to my heart had been almost completely blocked. Emergency surgery followed, and then weeks of recovery in the cardiac unit. During my 3-week hospital stay, Amanda visited only twice. The first time was right after my surgery, when I was heavily medicated and barely conscious. The second visit was brief, maybe 20 minutes, and she seemed distracted throughout, constantly checking her phone. She introduced me to her boyfriend Brian during that visit, a slick-looking guy with expensive clothes and a smile that never reached his eyes. Something about him immediately felt off to me, but I was in no condition to play the protective father. They left quickly with Amanda promising to come back soon. She never did. My friend Michael picked up the slack, visiting almost daily. We had worked together for 20 years before both retiring, and he lived just 10 minutes from the hospital. During one visit, I mentioned Brian and Amanda's short visit. Michael frowned immediately. "I ran into them at the supermarket last week," he said carefully. "They were asking some strange questions about your house and whether you had updated your will after Linda passed." I brushed it off at the time. Amanda was my only child, my only family. Of course, she would inherit everything eventually. Maybe she was just being practical considering my health scare. The doctors were finally satisfied with my recovery progress and scheduled my discharge for tomorrow morning. I would need to take things easy, attend cardiac rehabilitation 3 times a week, and drastically change my diet. The most important thing is to avoid stress. My cardiologist, Dr. Patel, emphasized during his final round. Stress is a silent killer for heart patients. If only he knew what was coming next. The hospital room had become all too familiar after 3 weeks. The same beige walls, the squeaky vinyl recliner, where visitors could sit, the small television mounted in the corner that I rarely turned on. The window overlooked the parking garage, hardly an inspiring view for recovery. But tonight, those mundane surroundings provided comfort in their familiarity, as I anticipated finally going home tomorrow. Nurse Cheryl, a kind woman in her 40s, who had been assigned to me since admission, brought in my dinner tray, along with the evening round of medications. The hospital food was predictably bland: baked chicken, steamed vegetables, and some kind of pudding that was supposed to be vanilla. "Big day tomorrow, Mr. Thompson," she said cheerfully, arranging the plastic cutlery on my tray. "Bet you can't wait to sleep in your own bed again." "You have no idea," I replied, already imagining the comfort of my memory foam mattress compared to the thin hospital bedding. 3 weeks in here is about 2 weeks and 6 days too long. Cheryl laughed as she checked my IV line. "Well, you're looking much better than when you came in. Just remember what Dr. Patel said about taking it slow. No jumping right back into projects around the house. Trust me, I won't be running any marathons or renovating bathrooms anytime soon." She had just left the room when my phone rang. Seeing Amanda's name on the screen brought a smile to my face. Maybe she was calling to offer a ride home tomorrow. "Hello, Amanda. Dad, oh my God, I have the most amazing news." Her voice bubbled with excitement, something I hadn't heard from her in years. "What's going on, sweetheart?" I sat up straighter in bed, already feeling more energized just hearing the happiness in her voice. "Brian and I are getting married tomorrow. Can you believe it? We decided we didn't want to wait. Just going to do a simple ceremony at City Hall with a few friends." The news hit me like a splash of cold water. My only daughter was getting married tomorrow. I knew she had been dating Brian, but I had only met him once. They had never mentioned engagement or wedding plans during their brief hospital visit. Tomorrow. That's very sudden. I managed, trying to keep the hurt from my voice. "I'm being discharged tomorrow morning. I could perhaps meet you at City Hall if—" "Oh, Dad, no!" she cut in quickly. "We're keeping it super small. Just us and Brian's best friend as witness. Nothing formal." There was an awkward pause before she continued in a rushed tone. "Actually, there's something else I need to tell you. Brian and I have been talking, and with your health situation, we think it's best if you don't go back to that big house all by yourself." My grip tightened on the phone. "What do you mean?" "Well, we've already sold your car and house." The monitor beside my bed began beeping faster as my heart rate jumped. "You've what?" "It's for your own good, Dad." Amanda's voice took on a condescending tone I'd never heard before. "That 2-story house is way too much for someone in your condition. All those stairs, all that maintenance." Brian found a really nice assisted living community just outside the city. They have medical staff on site activities, other people your age to socialize with. "Amanda," I struggled to keep my voice steady. "You can't sell my house. That's not how this works. That's my home, my property." She sighed as if I were a child, failing to understand simple instructions. Dad, remember when you were first admitted and unconscious after surgery? The doctors needed someone to make decisions, and I signed the power of attorney paperwork. It gives me the legal right to manage your affairs when you're unable to. The memory came back hazily. There had been a discussion about power of attorney early in my hospital stay. A lawyer had visited with paperwork, but I had told him I wanted to think about it overnight before signing anything. Had Amanda somehow signed in my place, the house is already sold, she continued matter-of-factly. We got an amazing price with the market so hot right now. The movers are coming tomorrow while we're at City Hall to pack everything up. Don't worry, we're keeping your personal items and photos. The rest is just stuff you won't need in the smaller living space. It's all taken care of. Amanda listened to me very carefully. You had no right to do this. I never signed any power of attorney. You're committing fraud. My voice rose despite the tightness in my chest. Dad, don't get yourself worked up. It's not good for your heart, she replied coolly. This is happening whether you like it or not. Brian and I will visit you once you're settled in your new place. The movers will be at the house at 9 tomorrow, and the new owners take possession at noon. I've got to go now. We have dinner reservations to celebrate. Amanda, wait. Goodbye, Dad. I'll call you once the wedding and move are done. The line went dead. I sat in stunned silence, the dinner tray forgotten in front of me. The heart monitor beside me was beeping rapidly, and seconds later Nurse Cheryl rushed back into the room. Mr. Thompson. What's happening? Your heart rate is through the roof. She checked the monitors with concern. My daughter, I managed to say through the shock. She just told me she sold my house and car without my permission. She claims to have power of attorney, but I never signed anything. Cheryl's professional demeanor faltered for a moment. That doesn't sound right. She adjusted something on my IV. Let me call Dr. Patel, and in the meantime, try to stay calm. Your heart can't handle this kind of stress right now. As she stepped out to make the call, I leaned back against the pillows, trying to process what had just happened. My own daughter was attempting to steal everything I had worked for my entire life. But in the midst of my anger and betrayal, I suddenly remembered something critical. Something Amanda didn't know. I never signed those power of attorney papers. The lawyer, Mr. Goodwin, had brought them during my second day in the hospital. I was groggy, but conscious enough to understand what was being proposed. This would give your daughter temporary authority to handle your financial matters while you're incapacitated, he had explained. I remembered asking him to leave the papers for me to review, saying I'd sign them the next day. But the next morning brought a battery of tests, and the papers sat forgotten in my bedside drawer. I had never signed them. Whatever Amanda had submitted to sell my house, it wasn't a legitimate power of attorney. She had either forged my signature or lied to the real estate agent. Either way, it was fraud. A small, grim smile formed on my lips as I realized her critical mistake. The house wasn't legally sold at all. I reached for my phone again. I needed help, and I needed it fast. She did what? Michael's voice boomed through the phone so loudly I had to pull it away from my ear. It was nearly 9 in the evening, but my oldest friend had answered on the first ring. Apparently she's selling my house and car, claiming she has power of attorney, I explained, keeping my voice low, as Dr. Patel had just left after checking my vitals and strongly advising me to remain calm. She's getting married tomorrow, and movers are coming to empty my house while she's at City Hall. That's straight-up criminal, Jason. You never signed power of attorney paperwork, did you? Michael knew me well enough to guess. No, never got around to it. The papers are still sitting in my drawer here unsigned. Thank God for procrastination, Michael said with grim humor. Look, I'm coming over to the hospital right now. We need to make some calls and stop this before it goes any further. As I hung up, Nurse Cheryl returned with a cup of tea. "I couldn't help overhearing some of that," she said, placing the cup on my tray. "My father went through something similar with my brother a few years ago. Elder financial abuse is more common than people realize." "Elder?" "I'm only 58, I protested weakly. She smiled sympathetically. "In these cases, it applies to any vulnerable adult. A hospital patient definitely qualifies." She hesitated, then continued. "Our hospital has a patient advocate and social worker on staff who specializes in these situations. Would you like me to call her? She might still be in the building." I nodded gratefully. "Yes, please. I need all the help I can get right now." Within 30 minutes, my quiet hospital room had transformed into an impromptu war room. Michael had arrived still wearing his gardening clothes, dirt under his fingernails from being interrupted while tending to his prized tomatoes. Lauren Diaz, the hospital social worker, sat in the visitor's chair with a notepad, asking detailed questions about Amanda Bryan and the situation. I had also called my longtime family lawyer, Thomas Westfield, who was on speakerphone. "If you never signed the POA, then Amanda has no legal authority to sell anything," Thomas confirmed after hearing the full story. "What's concerning is how far this has progressed. Has money changed hands? Are there signed contracts?" "I have no idea," I admitted. "She just said the house was already sold and movers were coming tomorrow." "This is elder abuse and fraud," Lauren stated firmly, her professional demeanor not hiding her outrage. "We see cases like this more often than you'd think, but usually it's more subtle. This is remarkably blatant." "What can we do to stop it?" I asked, feeling the pressure of time. Less than 12 hours remained before the movers would arrive at my house. Thomas's voice came through the speaker. "First, I'll draft an emergency declaration stating that no power of attorney has been granted. Jason, you'll need to sign it tonight, and I'll have it notarized immediately. We should also contact the police to report the fraud attempt." "My brother is a police officer," Cheryl offered unexpectedly from the doorway, where she had been listening. "He works in the financial crimes division. I can call him right now if you want." I nodded gratefully as Lauren continued. "We also need to figure out who the supposed buyer is and contact them directly. They're an innocent party who should know they're being defrauded." Michael was already on his phone, searching real estate listings. "Jason's address isn't showing as a pending sale on any of the major sites. This might be a private sale, or possibly not even real." Dr. Patel appeared at the doorway, looking concerned at the gathering in my room. "What's happening here? Mr. Thompson needs rest, not a committee meeting at 10 p.m. Lauren quickly explained the situation while I watched the doctor's expression shift from annoyed to concerned to outright alarmed. "This is precisely the kind of stress situation we need to avoid after cardiac surgery," he said sternly, checking the monitors beside my bed. "Your heart needs calm and rest to heal properly." "Doc, I understand," I replied. "But if I do nothing, I'll be homeless by tomorrow afternoon. That won't be great for my recovery either." Dr. Patel ran a hand through his thinning hair, clearly conflicted. "You're scheduled for discharge at 11 tomorrow morning. I cannot in good conscience release you earlier, given your condition." "What if I sign out AMA?" I asked, referring to leaving against medical advice. "I strongly advise against that," he replied firmly. "The risk of complication is still significant." Michael stepped forward. "Doctor, what if we ensure Jason remains seated calm and is monitored throughout? I understand the medical concerns, but this is his home we're talking about. Everything he owns." After several minutes of discussion, we reached a compromise. Dr. Patel would authorize an early discharge at 7 a.m. instead of 11, provided I promised to remain seated during any confrontation, wear a portable heart monitor, and return to the hospital immediately if I experienced any symptoms. Thomas would meet us at my house with the necessary paperwork, and Cheryl's brother Paul agreed to come in uniform to provide official police presence. As the improvised team dispersed to make preparations, I found myself alone again in the hospital room. Despite the stress and betrayal, I felt something I hadn't expected, a profound sadness. How had my relationship with Amanda deteriorated to the point where she would do this? I thought of her as a little girl, riding on my shoulders at the fair, laughing with complete trust and joy. When had that innocent child become someone capable of stealing from her own father? As I tried to sleep that night, my mind kept replaying memories. Amanda's 5th birthday, when I built her a dollhouse with working lights, teaching her to ride a bike in the driveway of the very house she was now trying to sell. The proud tears in my eyes as she graduated college, the first in our family to earn a degree. Where had I gone wrong? Was this truly my fault for working too many hours when she was young? Or had Brian's influence changed her so completely? Whatever the answer, tomorrow would bring a confrontation I never imagined having with my only child. As much as my heart ached from betrayal, I steeled myself for what needed to be done. This wasn't just about a house or car. It was about standing up against a fundamental injustice, even when it came from the person I loved most in this world. The morning air felt unusually crisp as Michael helped me out of his SUV at 6:45 a.m. Despite it being May in Seattle, a light fog hung over the neighborhood, giving everything an appropriately dramatic atmosphere. I was dressed in actual clothes for the first time in 3 weeks, jeans that now felt loose around my waist, a button-down shirt that Michael had brought from my closet, and a light jacket to ward off the morning chill. The portable heart monitor was discreetly attached under my shirt, with a small device in my pocket that would alert us if my heart rate became dangerous. Officer Paul Parker, Nurse Cheryl's brother, had followed in his personal vehicle, rather than a marked police car, wanting to avoid unnecessary attention from neighbors. He was a solidly built man in his 40s with a calm, measured way of speaking that immediately inspired confidence. "Remember, Mr. Thompson, I'm here in an official capacity, but we're keeping this low-key for now," he explained as we approached the house. "If your daughter has indeed committed fraud, we want to document everything properly." I nodded, trying to control the mixture of anger and anxiety churning in my stomach. This was the home Linda and I had purchased 25 years ago. The place where we had raised our daughter, celebrated countless holidays, and weathered life's storms together. The porch where I'd spent summer evenings reading. The garden Linda had lovingly tended until she became too ill. Every inch held memories. As we turned the corner onto my street, I felt my breath catch. A large moving truck was already parked in my driveway, its back doors open wide. 2 men in uniform were carrying my leather sofa, the one Linda and I had saved for months to buy when we first moved in, down the front walkway. "They're already here," I whispered, the reality of the situation hitting me fully. Michael placed a steadying hand on my shoulder. "Stay calm, Jason. Remember your heart." We parked across the street, and I took several deep breaths before getting out of the car. The movers paid us no attention as they disappeared back into the house for more furniture. Standing in the driveway directing the entire operation was a man I recognized instantly. Brian, Amanda's boyfriend, soon to be husband apparently. He was dressed casually in designer jeans and an expensive-looking polo shirt, checking something on his phone while occasionally pointing to indicate where items should go in the truck. There was no sign of Amanda. As we approached, Brian looked up from his phone, his expression changing from concentration to shock to poorly concealed panic in the span of seconds. "Mr. Thompson," he stammered quickly, regaining his composure and forcing a smile. "We weren't expecting you until later. Shouldn't you still be in the hospital?" Apparently I'm full of surprises, I replied evenly, fighting to keep my voice steady. Just like finding movers emptying my house without my knowledge or permission. Brian glanced nervously at Officer Parker, clearly noting his professional stance, even in civilian clothes. There seems to be some confusion. Amanda has everything handled. The paperwork, the sale, everything is completely legal. That's interesting, I said, considering I never signed any power of attorney giving Amanda authority to sell my property. 2 more movers emerged from the house carrying my dining room table, the solid oak piece I had refinished myself after finding it at an estate sale. Seeing strangers handling my possessions so casually made my blood boil. But I remembered Dr. Patel's warnings and took another deep breath. "Guys, hold up a second," Brian called to the movers who stopped and set the table down carefully on the lawn. He turned back to me, lowering his voice. "Look, Mr. Thompson. Amanda's just trying to help. You had a serious heart attack. You can't live alone in this big house anymore. The stairs alone could kill you." "That's my decision to make, not yours or Amanda's," I replied. "Where is my daughter? She's getting ready for our wedding," Brian said, a hint of defiance entering his voice. "This is supposed to be the happiest day of our lives. It's about to become memorable for entirely different reasons," Michael muttered beside me. Just then, a sleek black sedan pulled up to the curb. Thomas Westfield, my lawyer, stepped out carrying his briefcase. In the 30 years I'd known him, Thomas had barely aged, still sporting the same neatly trimmed mustache and wire-rimmed glasses. The only concession to time was his now completely silver hair. "Good morning, Jason," he said warmly, shaking my hand before turning a considerably cooler gaze toward Brian. "And you must be the soon-to-be son-in-law I've heard about." Brian's eyes darted between us, clearly realizing he was outnumbered. He pulled out his phone again. "I need to call Amanda." "That's an excellent idea," Thomas agreed. "In the meantime, I have some paperwork that the moving company might find interesting." He turned to the nearest mover, a burly man in his 30s. "Sir, may I ask who contracted your services today?" The man looked confused. We were told this was a standard move. Family relocating to Florida. Guy who hired us said he was the owner's son-in-law." Officer Parker stepped forward discreetly, showing his badge. "And were you shown any documentation proving ownership or right to remove these possessions?" The mover's expression changed to alarm. "Whoa, what's going on here? We're just doing the job we were hired for." "I understand," Parker assured him. "You're not in trouble, but this move needs to stop immediately. There's a legal dispute about ownership." As Parker continued explaining the situation to the increasingly concerned movers, I saw Brian speaking urgently into his phone, his face flushed with anger or panic. A moment later, I heard the sound of tires screeching as another car turned sharply onto the street. Amanda's red Volkswagen pulled up behind the moving truck, and she emerged, looking nothing like the daughter I remembered. Her hair was professionally styled, her makeup perfect, and she wore a simple white dress, presumably her wedding attire. The peaceful scene of my front yard descended into chaos as she stormed toward us. "Dad? What the hell are you doing here?" she demanded, eyes wide with shock. "You're supposed to be in the hospital until 11. "Surprise," I said quietly, the single word carrying the weight of my disappointment. "Amanda Thompson." Thomas stepped forward. "I'm Thomas Westfield, your father's attorney. I need to inform you that any attempt to sell this property without your father's consent constitutes fraud. He never signed a power of attorney, as you well know." Amanda's face drained of color, but she recovered quickly. "That's not true. I have the paperwork right here." She fumbled in her purse, pulling out a folded document. "The hospital provided it when Dad was unconscious. It's completely legal." Thomas took the paper, examined it briefly, then handed it to me. There at the bottom was what appeared to be my signature, except it wasn't. The handwriting was similar, but clearly forged, missing the distinctive loop I always put on the final letter. "That's not my signature," I said, my voice breaking slightly. "Amanda, how could you do this? Dad, you're confused," she insisted, but her voice wavered. "The doctor said you might have memory issues after the heart attack. You signed this. You just don't remember." Officer Parker stepped closer. "Ms. Thompson falsifying a power of attorney is a serious offense. It's a Class C felony in the state of Washington." Brian suddenly attempted to edge away from the group, moving sideways toward his car. Officer Parker noticed immediately. "Sir, I'm going to need you to stay right here while we sort this out." "I don't have to stay anywhere," Brian snapped. "We have a wedding appointment at 9. This is ridiculous. The old man clearly doesn't know what's good for him." My neighbors had begun to emerge from their houses, drawn by the unusual scene unfolding in my front yard. Kaczynski from next door, who had brought me casseroles for weeks after Linda died, stood on her porch in her bathrobe, watching with concern. Across the street, the Millers had come outside with their coffee mugs, pretending to check their mail, while obviously observing the drama. The physical and emotional strain was beginning to take its toll. A sharp pain flared in my chest, not severe, but enough to remind me of my vulnerable condition. I moved to sit on the front steps of my porch, breathing deeply as Dr. Patel had instructed. Amanda noticed immediately, her expression shifting from defiance to concern. For a moment, I saw a glimpse of my real daughter, breaking through whatever persona she had adopted. "Dad, are you okay?" She took a step toward me but stopped when Michael moved protectively closer to my side. "I'm fine," I assured her, though the pain had left me slightly breathless. "Just need to sit for a minute." "See, this is exactly why we were doing this," Amanda insisted, turning to the others. "He can't even handle a simple conversation without health issues. How is he supposed to live alone? That would be a valid concern if expressed with love and honesty," Thomas replied coolly. "Forging documents and selling someone's property without consent is not caregiving, Ms. Thompson. It's criminal exploitation." As Amanda opened her mouth to protest further, Brian suddenly made a dash for his car. Officer Parker reacted instantly, moving with surprising speed for his build. He caught up to Brian before he reached the vehicle, taking him firmly by the arm. "Sir, I need you to come back to the group." "Take your hands off me," Brian snarled, attempting to pull away. "You have no right to detain me." "Actually, I do," Parker replied calmly. "Attempting to flee raises reasonable suspicion, and I'm detaining you while we investigate potential fraud and elder abuse. Would you prefer I call for backup and make this official?" The flash of fear in Brian's eyes told me everything I needed to know about his past experiences with law enforcement. He stopped struggling immediately. As Parker led a subdued Brian back to our group, I looked directly at my daughter. She stood alone on my lawn, her white dress gleaming in the morning sun, tears beginning to streak her carefully applied makeup. In that moment, she looked both older and younger than her 32 years. A confused child in a woman's body, caught in a scheme much bigger than she had anticipated. "Amanda," I said quietly, "we need to talk, but not out here with an audience. Let's go inside." The living room looked strangely bare, with half the furniture already loaded into the moving truck. My recliner remained along with one end table and a few boxes stacked near the wall. The familiar family photos still hung on the walls. Linda holding newborn Amanda, our wedding picture, Amanda's graduation. It felt surreal to be having this conversation surrounded by the visual evidence of our once happy family. Officer Parker had asked the movers to wait outside while he documented their information. Thomas sat in a folding chair, brought in from the kitchen, his briefcase open on his lap, while Michael positioned himself near the doorway, giving us privacy, while remaining within earshot, in case I needed assistance. Brian sat stiffly on a wooden kitchen chair, his eyes darting around as if looking for escape routes. Amanda and I sat facing each other, me in my recliner, her perched on the edge of a packing box. Her wedding dress looked out of place among the half-packed living room, a jarring symbol of the celebration that would now never happen, at least not today. I want to understand. I began, keeping my voice soft despite the anger and hurt churning inside me. Help me understand how we got here, Amanda. She stared at her hands folded in her lap, unable to meet my eyes. You wouldn't understand. You've never been in our position. Try me. She took a deep, shuddering breath. Brian has some financial issues, debts that need to be paid quickly. When you had your heart attack, it seemed like... She trailed off. It seemed like a convenient opportunity, I finished for her. That's not fair, she protested weakly. No, what's not fair is my own daughter forging my signature and trying to sell my house out from under me while I'm recovering from nearly dying. The words came out sharper than I intended, and I saw her flinch. Brian shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Look, Mr. Thompson, this has all been blown out of proportion. We were just trying to help you downsize to something more manageable. The market's hot right now. It made financial sense. And where exactly was the money from the sale going? Thomas asked pointedly. Into a trust for Jason's care, perhaps. The uncomfortable silence that followed was answer enough. How much do you owe Brian? I asked directly. What kind of financial issues are we talking about? Brian looked to Amanda, who nodded slightly, as if giving permission. About $200,000, he admitted reluctantly. Sports betting. It started small, but then I tried to win back what I lost, and it just snowballed. And the sharks are circling, I guessed. How long do you have to pay? 3 weeks, he mumbled. But they've already sent guys to the apartment twice as reminders. I turned back to Amanda, feeling a new wave of disappointment. So you were willing to steal from me, your own father, to pay off his gambling debts. It wasn't just that, she said quickly. You had a massive heart attack, Dad. The doctors weren't sure you'd make it those first few days. Brian said. She hesitated, glancing at her fiancé. Said what? I prompted. He said, why wait for an inheritance when you might not even be able to enjoy the money anymore? Her voice was barely a whisper. He said you were probably going to die anyway, or end up in a nursing home. And I deserved something after all those years you put work before me and Mom. The cruelty of the words hit me like a physical blow. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to process the pain. When I opened them again, I saw Thomas and Michael exchanging grim looks. Amanda, I said slowly, do you truly believe I deserved this? After everything, do you really think so little of me? For the first time, she looked directly into my eyes, and I saw genuine shame there. I don't know what I was thinking. When the doctor said you might not recover, something broke in me. All those unresolved feelings about Mom's death, about you working all the time. It was like I wasn't myself anymore. A tear slipped down her cheek. Then when you started getting better, I knew we had to act quickly before you came home and discovered everything. You could have just asked for help, I said quietly. If Brian needed money, if you were in danger because of his debts, you could have come to me. Would you have given us $200,000 to pay off illegal gambling debts? Brian scoffed. No, I admitted. But I would have helped find a legitimate way to address the problem. Bankruptcy, credit counseling, legal protection, something that didn't involve stealing everything I own. The doorbell rang, interrupting our conversation. Michael went to answer it, returning moments later with an elegant woman in her 40s wearing a tailored business suit. This is Samantha Reed, Michael explained, the real estate agent who was handling the sale of your house. Samantha looked deeply uncomfortable as she took in the scene. Mr. Thompson, I was told you were incapacitated, and your daughter had power of attorney. If I had known there was any question about the authorization, I never would have proceeded with the listing. The fault isn't with you, I assured her. You were misled just like everyone else. About that, she said hesitantly. There's another issue you should know about. The deposit check Mr. Klein provided. She glanced at Brian. It bounced yesterday. The bank flagged it for insufficient funds. Brian's face went pale. That's impossible. The money was supposed to be there. Yet another fraud, Thomas noted dryly, making a note in his legal pad. This just keeps getting better. Officer Parker, who had returned from speaking with the movers, cleared his throat. Ms. Thompson, Mr. Klein, I need to explain your situation clearly. What you've attempted here constitutes multiple serious offenses: forgery, fraud, attempted theft, and elder exploitation. These are felony charges that carry significant penalties, including prison time. Amanda began sobbing quietly, her shoulders shaking under the delicate fabric of her wedding dress. Brian sat stone-faced, staring at the floor. Thomas leaned forward. Jason, as your attorney, I need to know how you want to proceed legally. We have clear evidence of criminal activity, but pressing charges is your decision. All eyes turned to me, waiting for my response. The weight of the moment felt crushing. This was my daughter, my only child, the little girl I had tucked into bed every night, whose scraped knees I had bandaged, whose college tuition I had paid. But she was also a grown woman who had made a deliberate choice to betray me in the most fundamental way possible. Before I could answer, a sharp pain stabbed through my chest, far more intense than the earlier twinge. The portable heart monitor in my pocket began beeping urgently. I clutched at my shirt, suddenly struggling to breathe. "Dad!" Amanda cried, rushing to my side. Michael was there instantly, helping me to lie back in the recliner. "Jason, stay with us. Deep breaths." "Call an ambulance," Thomas directed sharply. "His heart condition. The stress is too much." The room erupted into activity. Officer Parker immediately dialed 911 while Michael loosened my collar. Through the haze of pain, I saw Amanda kneeling beside me, her face twisted with fear and guilt. "Dad, please," she sobbed, taking my hand. "Please be okay. I'm so sorry. I never wanted this to happen." "I know," I managed to whisper, squeezing her hand weakly. "We'll talk when I'm better." The paramedics arrived with remarkable speed, probably because the hospital was only 10 minutes away. As they loaded me onto the stretcher, checking vitals and attaching a proper heart monitor, I caught a final glimpse of my daughter standing in the doorway of our family home. Her white dress was crumpled, her makeup streaked with tears, her carefully styled hair coming undone. In that moment, despite everything, all I saw was my little girl, lost, frightened, and desperately in need of guidance. As the ambulance doors closed, I made a decision about what needed to happen next. The second hospital stay was shorter, but no less serious. Dr. Patel didn't bother hiding his frustration when I was wheeled back into the emergency room less than 3 hours after being discharged. "This is precisely why we advise cardiac patients to avoid stress," he scolded as he reviewed my latest EKG. "You've strained your heart significantly. Fortunately, it's not another attack, but you've definitely set your recovery back by weeks." I spent 4 more days in the cardiac unit this time, under stricter monitoring. Michael visited daily, keeping me updated on the situation at home. The movers had returned everything they had loaded, though not necessarily to the correct rooms. Officer Parker had taken official statements from everyone involved, but at my request, had not immediately filed charges against Amanda or Brian. "Brian skipped town," Michael reported on his 3rd visit. "Apparently he never showed up for the wedding, just grabbed his stuff from Amanda's apartment and disappeared. Word is he headed to Vegas probably to try to win enough to pay off his debts. And Amanda? I asked, unable to keep the concern from my voice despite everything. Staying with a friend from what I hear. She's called the nurse's station twice asking about you, but hasn't tried to visit. Michael studied my face carefully. How are you feeling about all this? Jason really feeling? It was a complicated question. The betrayal still cut deep. But as the initial shock faded, it was being replaced by a profound sadness and confusion. I keep trying to understand how we got here, I admitted. Where did I go so wrong as a father that my daughter would do this to me? You didn't go wrong, Michael insisted. Amanda made her own choices. You can't blame yourself for that. But part of me did blame myself. Had I really been as absent as Amanda claimed during her childhood? Had my focus on providing financially come at too high a cost emotionally? These questions plagued me during the long hours alone in the hospital room. On my second day back, Dr. Rivera, the hospital psychologist, stopped by. Dr. Patel thought you might benefit from talking through some of what's happened, she explained, settling into the visitor's chair with a notepad. Emotional health directly impacts physical recovery, especially with heart patients. And initially reluctant, I found myself opening up to her over our daily sessions. We discussed parental love betrayal and the complex nature of forgiveness. I told her about my own father, a hard-working but emotionally distant man who had never once told me he loved me. Had I unconsciously repeated that pattern with Amanda? Parental relationships are rarely simple, Dr. Rivera observed. Children form narratives about their childhoods that may not align with reality, especially when filtered through the lens of their own adult struggles. But selling my house? I questioned. How does any childhood disappointment justify that? It doesn't, she agreed firmly. Understanding is not the same as excusing. Amanda's actions were wrong, regardless of her motivations or influences. The question is where you go from here. That question became more pressing when Amanda began sending letters. The first arrived on my third day back in the hospital, a thick envelope delivered by a nurse who mentioned a young woman who didn't want to disturb you had dropped it off. I left it unopened on my bedside table for hours, unsure if I was ready for whatever it contained. Michael, visiting that evening, noticed it immediately. You haven't read it? I shook my head. Not sure I want to hear her excuses. Michael considered this, then said simply, She's still your daughter, Jason. Whatever she did, whatever mistakes she made, that fact hasn't changed. At least, hear what she has to say. That night after Michael left, and the hospital had quieted for the evening, I finally opened the envelope. Inside were 10 pages of handwritten text, something I couldn't remember Amanda doing since high school in this digital age. Dad, it began. I don't expect forgiveness, and I won't insult you with excuses. What I did was unforgivable, and I take full responsibility. She went on to explain the gradual influence Brian had exerted over her life during their 2-year relationship, how he had isolated her from friends, encouraged her resentment about her childhood, and eventually convinced her that taking control of my assets was both their right and a necessary step for their future. She described a relationship that, in retrospect, had all the classic signs of emotional manipulation and control. None of that justifies what I did, she wrote. I made my own choices. I let greed and resentment overpower love and decency. I betrayed the one person who has always been there for me, even when I pushed you away. The letter ended with a simple request. When you're ready, I would like to talk. Not to ask for anything. I don't deserve anything from you now. But because I need to apologize to your face to take whatever consequences are appropriate, and to begin making amends if that's even possible. I'll wait for as long as it takes. I read the letter 3 times that night, emotions shifting with each reading. The raw honesty surprised me. There were no attempts to minimize what she had done, or to shift blame entirely to Brian. She acknowledged her actions as her own choices, motivated by her own flaws. 2 more letters arrived over the next 2 days. In them, Amanda shared that she had broken things off with Brian, completely moved out of their shared apartment, and started seeing a therapist to understand why she had been so vulnerable to his influence and capable of such betrayal. She also mentioned that she had spoken with Officer Parker, voluntarily providing a full statement about everything that had happened. By the time I was discharged again 6 days after the confrontation at my house, I had made a decision. I wasn't ready to forgive, but I was willing to listen. The path forward wasn't clear, but completely cutting my only child out of my life didn't feel right either. Michael drove me home again this time, without any dramatic confrontations waiting. The house felt emptier than I remembered, and not just because some furniture had been rearranged. Without Linda, without Amanda, without even the anticipation of family visits, it felt like a museum of my past life rather than a home. As I settled into my recliner that evening, Michael brought me a cup of tea and sat across from me. "So what happens now, Jason?" I considered the question carefully. "I need to talk to her. Not right away. I need some time to process everything. But eventually." Michael nodded thoughtfully. "Family is complicated. No clear villains or heroes most of the time, just people making mistakes and trying to find their way back to each other." "When did you get so philosophical?" I teased, grateful for his steady presence through this ordeal. He chuckled. "When you get to our age, you've seen enough family drama to write a book. Speaking of which, did I ever tell you about my cousin who faked his own death to avoid alimony payments?" We spent the evening sharing stories, laughing despite everything. It was exactly what I needed. A reminder that life would go on, that healing was possible, that connection remained even in the aftermath of betrayal. Before leaving, Michael paused at the door. "For what it's worth, Jason, I think you're doing the right thing. Amanda made a terrible mistake, but I've known that girl since she was in pigtails. There's good in her, always has been." "I hope you're right," I replied softly. "I really do." 3 weeks passed before I felt ready to meet with Amanda. During that time, I focused on my physical recovery, attending cardiac rehabilitation following my new diet, taking short daily walks that gradually increased in length. I also met with Thomas to update my will and establish proper legal protections for my assets, including a legitimate power of attorney naming Michael as my representative, should I become incapacitated in the future. I chose a neutral location for our meeting, Cary Park, with its stunning views of the Seattle skyline and Puget Sound. It was a place we had visited often, when Amanda was young, bringing picnic dinners and watching ferries cross the water as the sun set. I arrived early and found a bench facing the view, the late spring sunshine warm on my face as I waited. Amanda arrived precisely at the agreed time, approaching hesitantly. She looked different from the last time I'd seen her, simpler without the fancy styling and designer clothes. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and she wore jeans and a plain sweater. She looked more like the daughter I remembered. "Dad," she said softly, stopping a few feet away, as if uncertain whether she was welcome to come closer. "Thank you for meeting me." I patted the bench beside me. "Sit down, Amanda." She sat, maintaining a respectful distance between us. For several long moments, we both stared out at the water, the awkward silence stretching between us. Finally, she spoke. "I don't know where to begin," she admitted, her voice tight with emotion. "Everything I think of saying sounds inadequate. How about the truth?" I suggested gently. "No excuses, no justifications, just the truth." She nodded, taking a deep breath. "The truth is, I betrayed you in the worst possible way. I let resentment and greed override everything good you ever taught me. I listened to Brian instead of my own conscience, and I nearly stole everything you worked your entire life for." Her voice broke slightly. "I'm so ashamed I can barely look at you." "Why, Amanda?" I asked the question that had haunted me for weeks. Why go to such extremes if you needed money you could have asked? It wasn't just about money, though. That was part of it, she replied slowly. When Mom died, something broke inside me. I felt so alone, and you seemed to disappear into your work even more. I built this narrative that you'd always put work before family, that you didn't really care about us. It wasn't fair or true, but it helped me make sense of my pain. She twisted her hands in her lap. Then Brian came along, and he was so attentive at first, so interested in everything about me. When I told him about my resentments, he encouraged them, kept pointing out how much your house was worth, how you'd owe me an inheritance eventually anyway. It started as conversations, then jokes, then serious plans. By the time you had your heart attack, he had me completely convinced that taking control of your assets was both our right and the sensible thing to do. And the power of attorney? I asked. I forged it, she admitted, looking down at her hands. The lawyer left the papers, and I took them when you were sleeping. I practiced your signature for hours before adding it to the document. It was calculated. Her frankness was both painful and refreshing. There were no attempts to minimize what she had done, or to shift blame entirely to Brian. Where is Brian now? I asked, though Michael had already told me he'd left town. Gone. He disappeared the day everything fell apart, took whatever cash we had, and vanished. A hint of bitterness crept into her voice. The last I heard, he was in Las Vegas. Officer Parker says they have outstanding warrants for him in 3 states for similar scams. And you, what have you been doing these past weeks? Amanda straightened slightly. I found a new apartment. It's tiny and nothing special, but it's a fresh start. I got a job waiting tables at night and doing administrative work during the day. And I'm seeing a therapist twice a week trying to understand why I was so vulnerable to Brian's manipulation and capable of such betrayal. I nodded, studying her profile against the backdrop of the Seattle skyline. Officer Parker mentioned you gave him a full statement. Yes, I told him everything, including my role in forging the power of attorney. He said it's up to you whether charges are filed. She turned to face me directly for the first time. I want you to know that whatever you decide, I understand. If you need me to face legal consequences for what I did, I accept that. The sincerity in her eyes caught me off guard. This was a side of Amanda I hadn't seen in years. Direct, accountable, without the defensive edge that had characterized our interactions since Linda's death. I'm not going to press charges, I said after a moment. That's not the kind of relationship I want to rebuild, if we're going to rebuild anything at all. Relief washed over her face, followed quickly by determination. I want to make this right, Dad. I know I can't undo what I did, but I want to try to earn back your trust however long that takes. Trust is built over time with consistent actions, I replied. Words are important, but they're just the beginning. I know. She hesitated, then added, I don't expect forgiveness. Not right away, maybe not ever. What I did was unforgivable. Nothing is unforgivable between parent and child, I said softly, surprising myself with the words. Difficult to forgive, yes. Requiring time and healing, absolutely. But not unforgivable. Tears filled her eyes. I don't deserve that kind of grace. Forgiveness isn't about deserving, Amanda. It's a choice, and it's as much for me as for you. Carrying anger and resentment isn't good for my heart, literally or figuratively. We sat in silence for a while, watching ferries cross the Sound and seagulls wheel overhead. It was a companionable silence, not the tense one that had begun our conversation. I've been thinking about selling the house, I said eventually. She looked at me in surprise. "But you love that house. It's your home." "It was our family home," I corrected gently. "With your mother gone and you grown, it's too big for just me. The maintenance is becoming a burden, and after the heart attack, those stairs aren't ideal. I think it's time for something smaller, more manageable." "Is this because of what happened?" she asked, concern furrowing her brow. "Because if it is, please don't change your life based on my mistake." I shook my head. It's been on my mind for a while, even before all this. The heart attack just clarified my thinking. I spent decades accumulating things, working to pay for a big house and nice possessions. Now I'm wondering if that was the right focus. "What would you do instead? Travel, maybe. See some of those places your mother and I always talked about visiting someday. Volunteer. Spend time with people rather than maintaining property." I smiled slightly. Near-death experiences have a way of clarifying priorities. Amanda nodded thoughtfully. "That actually sounds really good, Dad. A new chapter." "Speaking of new chapters," I said, "I thought we might try a new tradition. If you're free on Sundays, maybe we could have dinner together. Start small, see how it goes." The hope that bloomed on her face was answer enough. "I'd like that very much." As we stood to leave, Amanda hesitated, clearly wanting to hug me, but uncertain if such contact was welcome yet. I made the decision for her, opening my arms. She stepped into my embrace, and I felt her shoulders shake with silent tears. "One day at a time," I whispered. "That's how we'll rebuild." Over the following months, we kept our word to each other. Sunday dinners became our new tradition. Amanda helped me find a smaller, single-level home closer to the city, and I sold the family house to a young couple expecting their first child. There was something poetic about passing it on to a family just beginning their journey. With Thomas's help, I established a proper will and financial plan, including provisions for Amanda that would activate when she demonstrated sustained responsibility. I took a river cruise through Europe, something Linda and I had always dreamed of doing together. Though bittersweet without her, it felt right to finally see those places we'd talked about for so many years. Amanda thrived in her new independence. She was promoted at her day job, enrolled in evening classes to finish the master's degree she'd abandoned when meeting Brian, and even started volunteering at a women's shelter, helping others recognize the signs of manipulative relationships. 6 months after our confrontation, I hosted Thanksgiving at my new home. Michael came with his daughter and grandchildren. Amanda brought pumpkin pie she had baked herself, using her mother's recipe. As I looked around the table at these people who had supported me through the darkest moments and celebrated the brighter ones, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. Life hadn't turned out as I'd planned. The betrayal by my only child had been one of the most painful experiences imaginable. Yet through that pain had come unexpected growth and clarity. I had learned that possessions matter far less than people, that forgiveness liberates the forgiver as much as the forgiven, and that it's never too late to rebuild what's broken if both sides are willing to do the work. As Amanda helped me clear the dishes after dinner, she paused, looking at me with serious eyes. "I need you to know something, Dad. I think about what I almost did every single day. It keeps me honest, keeps me working to be better. That's how we grow," I replied, squeezing her shoulder gently. "By looking our worst moments in the eye and choosing to be different going forward." She smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "I'm thankful for second chances." "Me too," I said, and I meant it with my whole heart, my newly strengthened, carefully tended heart. Have you ever had to forgive someone who betrayed your trust? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story of forgiveness and family healing touched you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more Gil Life experiences. Remember, sometimes the deepest wounds can become the foundation for the strongest relationships, if we're brave enough to do the hard work of healing together. Thank you for listening, and I wish you strength on your own journey of forgiveness.